Hello, Rachel. How are you?
Hi, Ryan. As for how I'm doing, time will tell.
Time will tell. Time puns are bound for this one. And dare I say, Yum Yum is also abound for our discussion of Star Trek Discovery. I'm Ryan, that's Rachel, we're married, we're rewatching Star Trek Discovery for entertainment purposes, but what Rachel doesn't know is that this is actually a secret test of our strength as a married couple, because will we survive by the end? Will our marriage stay intact by the end of this whole entire perilous journey? Or will it in fact strengthen us, give us honor, as good warriors often need? We are the Yum Yum Podcast. This is our show, Yum Yum Trek. And we are, of course, Yum Yum because in 2 episodes' time, Commander Nan, who is in this show, Star Trek Discovery, responds with the iconic lines, Yum Yum. She was in this episode. She didn't get to speak. She just got to look concerned. When I say she looked concerned, what I really mean is the actress playing the character of Commander Nan looked as if she was emanating yum yum, which yum yum, as we know, is such a universal kind of feeling now. It's not even a phrase, feeling, that yum yum could mean anger, horny, happy, fearful, anything. And that's kind of our show. Rachel, we are discussing an older episode. We are discussing one from Season 2. Do you remember the title?
Through the Valley of Shadows.
You got it. Do you remember the episode number?
12.
Oh, you had to think about that one, huh? So we are up to episode 12 of Season 2, Through the Valley of Shadows, which comes in at a 7.5. According to IMDb, this is the plot. A 4th signal leads the USS Discovery to an insular world where Pike is forced to make a life-changing choice. Burnham and Spock investigate a Section 31 ship gone rogue, leading to a discovery with catastrophic consequences. Interesting. That's the plot summary there. Very accurate, but it's the wording that makes it sound a little different to what you actually get from the episode.
Yeah, that's fairly common for those descriptions, is that they're technically correct, but misleading in an odd way. And it's usually like, well, yeah, I guess that kind of makes it sound more interesting than it is. But it also makes it sound more confusing.
Even if a crystal is revealed to you, even if it provides you with the answers you seek, you are not strong enough to accept them.
So, what is your history with this episode, Rachel?
I remember that I didn't like it on the first watch, but I hated it less than other episodes. So it looks good by comparison.
At the time?
But it's not an actual good episode. And that's the way that I felt then. And it's still pretty much the way that I feel about it after just rewatching it.
I remembered I also didn't care for this episode, but I felt at the time I thought it was alright. I enjoyed it enough. It felt like I had watched an episode of television instead of static for 45 minutes, which I had been feeling with the previous episodes in the past, as I have been when we've been rewatching it even more so. It was kind of, when we were doing those previous episodes over the last few weeks, I kept thinking, well, there's that one where Pike gets the time crystal. I know that's going to be like a buoy in the sea of nothingness for me, because I remembered that episode had a plot and had character stuff. And that is still true. This episode does have 2 very compelling plots and some character work is actually put into them. They both feature character arcs and learning, and that was very much appreciated because the last few episodes have been completely plotless. They've been larger season narrative plot stories, but overall, as episodes on their own, they have been fairly dull. And I was looking forward to seeing this one again because it was the one I remembered in the back half of season 2 having a storyline in it, which season 2 started with. Remember when the episodes had plots? We keep mentioning that, but remember when New Eden was an episode that had a plot in it?
Yeah, I do. And
then they stopped doing that.
Yeah.
And now we're back to it in some way. I don't know if you'll agree with me about this, but didn't this feel like such a season 1 episode?
It felt more like season 1, I guess, but I struggle because the sensibilities are so season 2 and the direction is very season 2.
You mean lens flares?
Lens flares
Spinning
all
camera?
over the place. Spin that camera. ADR that line, baby.
I felt it was very reminiscent of season 1, just in terms of, by a pure, isolated episode, it had the script structure felt very reminiscent of season 1, just how the way the episode is paced and the way that the events happen in a certain order and the way they cut back and forth felt very reminiscent of season 1, as well as just the overall bringing back the Klingon drama stuff, which of course season 1 was filled with, and we've been away from it so long that they had to give us a recap of the last time we had Klingon drama in this season.
Your son.
Technically, Vulcan Laurel's son. Laurel had hidden him away for his own safety. No one wanted to raise him, to protect him. And instead, I risked both of their lives. He was placed in the care of the monks on board, where he'll be raised as the son of none, like I was.
The first act of this episode did the remember the last few episodes scenes. The very first scene was her telling Amanda, a character who serves no purpose in this episode, by the way, was Michael recapping Amanda, who again served no purpose in this episode, recapping her on what happened last episode.
Yeah, but we do get confirmation that she kept her maiden name, I guess.
We already knew this. We already knew that she goes by Amanda Grayson. So, because who cares? But this episode felt very reminiscent of season 1 to me. The just the overall feeling of it, the focus on character, and it really reminded me of Context is for Kings, especially that back half of it, where the back half had an interesting horror on a spaceship storyline that was squandered because it was focused on so little, and this episode had the exact same thing with a Section 31 ship, where that felt very similar, where I wish that was the whole focus of the episode, was Michael and Spock on that little mission and they meet that guy and then have that unfold. But just like Context is for Kings, we spend so much time on other stuff that interesting nugget is there, but it's languishing.
But we can't take any time away from, the very important scene where we get to know an important character who continues to...
Such an important character. Dare I say, the most important character. They're like Jar Jar Binks. They're the key to all of this.
They were hatched ready, Ryan.
They were hatched ready. Linus?
Playing the auto-antonym game.
Well, I know what an auto-antonym is, so I already know the game, as Paul says. So that was a whole scene to characterize, give some characterization to the minor characters, which we have wanted from the show. This is kind of a response to the critiques we had of Arium, in which they gave her all of her characterization before they ejected her out into space to choke on the cold vacuum. They're giving those characters something. They play games, but it was really weird because that scene just starts with all of his characters doing that forced laughter, which has always been weird. It's that classic, you enter a scene and the character says, "And that's how I got a nipple piercing," and then everyone goes, "Oh, you," and it implies that person has a character of some sort that we never experience. Linus, what a great character he was.
Linus needs to whip one out.
Don't choke.
He can choke.
Oversight. Choke on that.
Oh, boom.
Humans.
Which is the A plot?
The time crystals.
Is it?
Yeah.
So you're saying Pike's the A plot? Is that what you're saying? Why?
Okay. So
I'm
here is how I'm going to explain it.
Go on.
Because there isn't a right answer to this. And here is why I think that.
Mm-hmm.
The plot of Pike's storyline is the A plot, but the execution of that plot in the episode is the B plot.
Is it?
And the Michael stuff is the B plot that acts more like an A plot.
See, I agree and disagree. So why I asked that question is, I, like season 1, genuinely struggle to know which is the A plot and which is the B plot. I agree. I think it's supposed to be Captain Pike's story. And I say that because when you structure...
It's the one that propels the story
Does it?
more.
Does it? What does he learn that actually increases the threat?
No, that doesn't matter. They don't care about that. He just gets the time crystal.
Oh,
and they
you mean
needed
it's
the
setting
time
up...
crystal.
but character-wise, it's setting up his character for the spin-off show that hasn't been made yet.
They don't care about character.
No, I disagree. This episode definitely did care about character.
No,
you may not have enjoyed
no.
it, but...
So, what I mean by they don't care about characters is that they are interested in what those characters are doing within this episode, but not necessarily the longer term impacts.
I gotta say, you and I are on different sides of the fence. I think that's what all this episode is. All this episode, character stuff, is the furthering of the long-term effects. We'll talk about Pike later in the episode, but I asked the question of what is the main story? Who is the A plot? Who is the B plot? Because to me, it's obvious it is Pike's story. That's the A plot. Because of how they focus the narrative structuring, the way that scenes are structured, his comes first. That story of him going down to the planet, him knowing about time crystals, him and Laurel and Ash, all of that comes first in the story. And then Michael finding this distress signal or this anomaly and actually going out and asking for permission from Saru. Structurally, it is proposing that Pike's story is more important, hence we're getting to it first. Thus, it creates that effect that this is the A story. But when watching the episode, his story has no story beats of anything of note. It is just, he goes down to a planet, he meets a bunch of monks, learns some cool sci-fi lore, but he doesn't actually encounter anything of raising the stakes until the very final moments of, you own this time crystal, you see your future, you may go mad, and if you take the crystal, your fate is sealed. How is it sealed? We don't know. Even though this is a sci-fi world, this is fate and destiny, which is fantasy, so if you take the crystal, your fate is sealed. However that works scientifically, as soon as the character said that, all I could think of was Commander Data just talking. Like, all I could think of was Data just computing how that doesn't make scientific sense, but whatever. But from a narrative perspective, Pike's is more of a character thing, right? It's about him sticking to his guns and getting the crystal and going on this arc about learning about his horrific fate and accepting it. But from just a pure watching it standpoint, there's not a lot of gravitas to it because it is one of the two stories going on. So you go to Michael's storyline, which is the B story, And hers is the one that has a lot more going on from the beat-to-beat moments. There's this...
The ratcheting of tension as well is way more present in that plot.
a cat and mouse game. And also, I liked this episode for Michael in a way because this is the first episode in a while in which it's very clear what her arc is. She, at the beginning, is refusing the call of the hero. She's refusing the idea that she is the center of this all. And then by the end, she accepts that she's the center of this all. She accepts that she's the thing that control needs to stop. She had an arc. She had a journey. She had themes going on this episode, which Pike didn't necessarily have. Like, Pike's just a good guy. He goes down there with good intentions, finds out some spooky things that I understand because I've seen Menagerie, and then accepts it because he's a good guy. From an A-story perspective, that is a little less interesting. So that's why I struggle with going, well, why isn't Michael's one the A story? They focus as much time on it, running, like, duration-wise, but the way how scripts work and TV works with these A-B stories is which one is presented first and which one the episode decides has more gravitas. And this one decided his has more gravitas.
Yes. And also, in terms of structure as well, that A-plot is usually the one that we return to after we've had an ad break.
Yeah, and so this one is like season 1, where, yes, you can definitely say this is the A-plot, but it really doesn't feel like it should be out of the two. Not to bash the Pike plot, I did enjoy it, but it did lack any teeth to it. It was just, nice guy goes down with good intentions, finds out a spooky thing, and still goes with his good intentions.
I'm not going to abandon the things that make me who I am because of the future. It contains an ending I hadn't foreseen for myself.
How did you feel about this episode overall?
It was fine. It didn't offend me. It didn't upset me. It passed, and it was a little bit more intriguing than the white noise of the previous couple of episodes. But it also feels odd because it's trying to do things that we've been asking of the series.
Yes, it is.
But it still doesn't quite get there, and I don't quite know if that is that it's in so deep into shit territory for me that it trying to dig itself out of the shit just it
with
doesn't
its golden
get,
shovel.
Yeah, it doesn't quite get there because it's so deep for me, or if it's the episode actually not doing as much work as it thinks that it is.
Yeah, I liked this episode on this watching just as much as the first time, I think. There are things that niggle at me, but I do appreciate that this has a structure.
I have a list of nitpicks.
As do I. I appreciated the very clear defining structure of the storylines going on. A plus B equals C in this episode, and I was so thirsty for that. I feel like I have been just dehydrated for so long of having a structure to an episode. And although that this one isn't the greatest to me, it does stand higher because of that, and that is a part of watching a serialized story structure, right? That is a part of watching a binge-worthy show or modern prestige show where it's not just a part of a single episode, it's part of a larger narrative, and it's an 8-hour, 10-hour, 12-hour, 14-hour movie, or whatever you want to say. An episode like this, which is okay, stands up as being much better if the previous episodes, or the one after, have been fairly dull, or completely annoying, or completely forgettable. An episode like this that just has the basics of story structure stands so much greater because it has the basics of story structure.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, structuring in stories for scripts exist for reasons. And the last few episodes have thrown those away. They break the rules, or they form their own in a way that isn't as conventional. This one goes back to the basics, and it is all the more rewarding because those old basics work for a reason. They guide us along. They make us participate in the journey instead of making us feel numb, making us feel confused, or making us feel apathy like the last couple of episodes. This episode isn't great. It's not the best one. But it stands so much higher because of the shit around it.
Yeah.
And that's just a symptom of serialized storytelling.
The thing that I love about television is that you can spend real time getting into the nuances and the smaller details of characters' lives and arcs that you just don't have time for in 2 hours.
To go on this storyline with Michael, Spock, and that guy from the Shenzhou, I actually really liked this plot, again, from a script structure standpoint. There were no moments in the actual plot that I said, that doesn't make any sense, or that's just there because they need it to be, or that's bullshit,
See,
or
I
this.
had
But it was the
that.
dialogue. The dialogue is what made me feel that way. Hey, this is the guy from the Shenzhou show flashback of a guy that I still don't remember. I remember when we started the show, I said, we've got to remember who this guy is. I completely forgotten him. But it was the dialogue, because to me, Control, luring them out there, pretending to be this guy, all that
That's
works to
fine.
me.
That's
them
fine.
on the ship, him knowing that Spock would separate off, and Spock figuring out this, and Michael figuring out that, and them having to magnetize the floor and this, and shoot him there, and figure out what Control's plan. That all makes sense to me. And it actually is fairly compelling when you think about it. From a singular episode perspective and a grander narrative perspective. But it all comes down to what the characters are actually saying and doing. And surprisingly, the doing aspect of the episode was done, to me, competently and fairly well.
I
The
agree.
actions that they made sense. Too bad the things that they are saying feel artificial. But this is where we may cross paths. This is where we may divert from one another now.
Husband, yes.
I did not think that the dialogue was as bad once they met that guy. When it was just Michael and Spock, yes, but when he existed, Gant, I want to say his name is, when he existed and when he became Control, the dialogue was solid enough. It wasn't like Shakespeare, but once it was just Michael and Spock again after and before, that's when it feels really forced, because that's the dynamic that the showrunners care the most about. We want to know who Spock is. We want to know who Michael is to Spock. And it feels very fake and artificial because they know as writers that this is the thrust of the whole season. So they put so much emphasis on it that it breaks apart like bread in water. But when it was actually the plot with the guy from the Shenzhou and them figuring out what Control's doing here and this, and the action scene doing this, I thought the dialogue was actually fairly okay. I actually didn't mind how Michael figured out that it was Control, with just Control just kind of just talking like Control, just
Dropping it in.
and it felt natural to me. Even the music in that scene I didn't find telling me too much to feel the drama there. But when it's just Michael and Spock, the dialogue all just falls apart. Because I think that they worry too much about making us know that they're brother and sister. Because we've never known that Spock had a secret sister before. How does that happen? How do we not know?
Yeah.
So that's what I feel with the Michael storyline. I actually enjoyed Michael in the episode. She had something to learn about herself. She had insecurities she had to overcome, and a person from her past to remind her of how far she's come.
I can see the legitimacy of that approach and that understanding. And I'm kind of disappointed that that wasn't my experience with it, because I would have enjoyed a large part of this episode more than I did.
Yeah.
But for me, I kept on tripping up in both this plot and Pike's plot because I would hear a line of dialogue and I kept on feeling like I was thinking about it the wrong way, because I would think about it and conclude that it was illogical. And then I was like, but that's not the way that the show wants me to think, because it's clearly
About the feeling.
it's about the feeling a lot of the time, but it's also, this is the path. And I just kept on thinking of other things, not necessarily things that brought in other shows, but just to me, well, wouldn't it be more interesting if they did this? Or couldn't they bring up this thing from last week?
The potentials.
Or, yeah, but also just the, like, logical inconsistencies and just...
Well, what was that in the Michael storyline? Because another thing I wanted to mention, maybe this is because of Pike's storyline, and I have some issues with Pike's more so, is, to me, her story was filled with details that actually were coherent in this singular episode, as well as what we know to be the grander narrative. They were filled with lots of details. While Pike's one is a lot more like, it seals your fate. What does that mean? It just does. Well, this is like, well, Control has nanomachines who do this, and this, and it wants to do this, and it all actually,
Okay.
A plus B equals C in this.
This may
Story, to
be me not following the plot enough.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But this was one of the things that I was just like, wait. Oh, did you just do this on purpose to make it easier on yourselves? And that was the end of the episode.
Yes.
When evil Gant has been kind of destroyed.
Yeah, he's been magnetized.
Magnetized to the floor. So he's...
And that's a setup.
Yeah. That's fine. Spock says that he was fooling their tricorders.
Yes.
Okay.
That's why they couldn't read that he wasn't alive.
They couldn't...
Like, he was not a robot man.
Yes. Not a robot man. And then I was thinking, but you said... Control said that Gant expired with the rest of the crew.
Yes.
So how did the nanomachines manage to revive the dead man and fool the life signals?
Oh, okay. So I have
enough. No, this isn't it. This is just one thing.
Yeah, because I think I actually have some answers for that.
So yeah, and I'm fully okay with that. But this is how my mind went. Okay, so you're saying that he was fooling the tricorder, but it wasn't just the tricorder that was fooled, it was the entire shuttle.
Yes.
Because they were scanning from the shuttle to the ship.
Mm-hmm.
But Control didn't think to fool the whole ship that it was in later. So why did it fool one but not the other?
Okay, I got an explanation for this. So, to me, and this could have been explained better, but to my understanding, he was not, like, sucked out into space and then Control decided to take him over. I think Control said it took him over just like Leland did, like they did with Leland. So maybe he was alive and it infected him and then stuck out in space or whatever. That's why he had a spacesuit for a start, because Control... Like the Borg, need the organic parts to operate this meat suit. So he would have some life signatures of some sort, but it's masking its own nanomachines from it. Well, hold on, it's what I understood was it was masking its own nanomachines within the body from their scanners, and the only reason Spock figured out that there was nanomachines in him was he was using the Section 31 ship's interior scanners to scan specifically for anything relating to Section 31's stuff. And what my belief
you mean
is...
Control stuff.
Yeah, the Control stuff.
Yeah.
And I think, to me, Control made a logical lapse of not thinking that they would use the Section 31 ship on it, because it didn't expect them to go on it.
Spock well enough to know that Spock would volunteer and go and do that.
But
he didn't know Spock well enough to think that Spock would ask the follow-up question to make sure that he'd fully gotten all of the information.
Well, that's a...
So
now,
he's smart, but not smart enough.
Not infallible. Because that's also a part of what it wants the data for. It wants the data so that it is now completely unstoppable. You can tell by the actor who played Gant that when they decided that they're going to go back on the Section 31 ship, you could tell from that performance that it did not expect them or want them to go back on that ship, because then it would have to rewrite its whole entire plan around that. And I think in part, it knew that Spock would want to go there, but initially it itself wanted to go there. And I believe, just because of that actor's performance, and this is a positive, I thought that actor who played Gant, I thought he was very good as this. And that's why I was a bit bummed that the focus of this episode wasn't on that, because he was very compelling. And I wish that it was a 60-40 split instead, with this being the 60.
Yeah.
Because I found him compelling. And if I had spent more time with him, I would have felt the gut punch of him being a fake. Because we didn't know Control could act until this episode, right? Leland, it was, I'm a robot man.
Yeah.
But this guy was charming and compelling. And I thought
more in Leland's transition, that Control can act, Control can pretend. And then that monologue of him changing characters really showed that already.
Yeah. To me, this performer here gave a lot of life that may not have been the details in the script, and we have often praised those elements before with previous episodes of Discovery and episodes of other television shows. I think he did not expect fully, Control did not expect fully for how much Spock was going to figure it out, and if they did, he did not expect Michael to figure it out before Spock did, because that's what happened.
Yeah.
Michael figured it out before Spock did also. And also another thing to point out is the communications were cut off where Spock was, and Spock had to fix that to get in contact with Michael in the first place. Remember, he had to fiddle around and then get on the speaker?
Yeah, he couldn't use his badge. He had to use the speaker.
And he had to fix that. So in a way, Control even had that. But that kind of answers
Control managed to do some things, but not all of the things. And for me, it felt contrived, not logical.
See, I think it felt fairly detailed to me, but I put that in part upon my investment in that story being far higher than the investment I had for any other storyline in this singular episode.
And that's on me. That's my bias against the show.
Well, this is a part of a rewatch. Is not just the singular episode experience, but the overall season experience affecting a singular episode watching. Because if the overall season has numbed you to the point in which now we're up to episode 12, and this is how you experience it, that says a lot about the overall experience, not just the singular chapter by chapter beat, because after all, this isn't just a single episode, guys, it's a chapter in a book of a larger narrative.
I think that the line now between movies and television is essentially over. And certainly the way the media is consuming it, it's essentially gone. And so, especially if we're asking people to pay, our mandate together has been, we are going to deliver you a movie on television. It's just going to be 13, 14, 15 hours long.
I've got a question for you.
Yes.
Control.
Yes.
Knows about the sphere data and knows that it will make it complete and fulfill its cycle. And it even says in this episode that it at the moment has pure computations on the mechanics of time and knows that it will win. It knows
all possible futures.
And this is more of a question from from previous episodes, but we never discussed it.
Mm-hmm.
Which Control is this? Because how does it know that? Is this the Control? Because Arium got infected from a thing from the future.
Yeah.
So did Arium get infected with Control from the future? And if so, then Arium infected the Control from the past. How is this not the fully formed Control, if that's the case?
No, so the current version of control that we are seeing is not control from the future. It is the control that got like the 25% of the data
Oh,
that Arium downloaded that hid inside the thing that poked Leland in the eye.
Oh, I understand that, but what is that thing that infected Arium if it is not a variant of control from the future? Because that only happened because of the probe that Control sent back in that time rift. So I know that this control had 25% of the sphere data, but even before that, it had this knowledge of the knowledge of control from the future. So is it technically not control from the future has updated the previous one to know what it knows? See how your brain's falling apart? Because the answers are technically no, it isn't, but the details lean towards that being the case. Because I got confused.
I didn't think that present past control in this version of events knew about the sphere data until future control
I agree.
changed it into just present control when Arium gave it the data. That's when I think control found out. Present altered control found out from future control, and then that's how it became present control as opposed to past control.
Well, then why did present... Again, this is a lot of wordage, so let me just say this. If that's the case, then why did present control, before getting this 25% data from Arium in the Project Daedalus episode,
Yes.
before that episode happened, why did it advance its intelligence and kill all of the Section 31 admirals and desire the sphere data? How did it not know about, how did that happen outside of Arium was infected from control in the future and upgraded control in the past to benefit the needs of control from the future? If that's the case, does that technically not mean control from our past, from this era of Star Trek Discovery, has been updated with the goals and desires of control from the future? Does that technically not mean that the control that they're facing off against in this episode, the one that wants the data to make itself perfect, is not control from the future, who already has the knowledge of the data that has made it perfect? This is what I got confused about when Gant as Control gave a giant-ass monologue about how it has wants, needs, desires, feelings about how it wants and how it wants all of this knowledge, yet it already knows time and how everything's going to play out and how it's already super intelligent, indicating it already has the knowledge from Control in the future, which in turn indicates that this technically is Control from the future infecting Control from the past. I know we've said control a lot, it's all lost all meaning, that word, but this is the kind of sci-fi thing that trips me up because we're not supposed to take it that way.
That is what I meant when I said I feel like I think about this episode the wrong way because I'm not meant to think about all of that. I'm not meant to. It doesn't feel like that's what they intended, and it feels like I'm destroying my own potential of enjoying the show at all by thinking about it the way that I would think about it. And so this is the way that I construct the understanding. Probe from future.
Yes.
With future control.
Yes.
Comes to present.
Yes.
At present time, control has been developed by Section 31 to try and prevent another war.
Yes, it's a danger assessment intelligence.
Danger assessment artificial intelligence, right? So, future control infects Arium.
Who communicates back directly to the present control.
Yes. And then at that point in time, that is when Control kills the admirals and takes over the station where it's based.
But why does it do... But Rachel, why does it do that?
Because Arium,
Who is Future Control?
who is infected with a program of Future Control, not is Control, just
Okay.
is infected with the virus.
Except for every time they said she's infected by Control.
Yes, infected by Control, not is Control.
Okay.
So I feel like there's a difference with the degree of infection between what Arium experienced and what Leland experienced.
And I get what you're saying. So the Future Control sent a program to upgrade the past Control
No,
to
so
acquire
I
its
think-
goals, needs, and understanding to become the Control it is destined to be. Because in Perpetual Infinity, I think even Michael Burnham's mother said it always becomes this
Yeah,
because Skynet.
yes.
Time is what you make.
Fate, destiny, bullshit. Yes, that happens. But I thought not all of Control managed to get downloaded because they managed to destroy the probe when it was the Ash and Pike show in the shuttle.
What you're getting...
I didn't think that it got enough
No,
of it through for it to be fully controlled, but just enough for it to progress.
I'll pull you up there. What it was doing in that probe episode was trying to download the sphere data for itself.
But then that doesn't make sense because then they take a shuttle to the Section 31 ship and they don't mention that they could access the sphere data through that shuttle, and they haven't mentioned that they've cut off the link between all shuttles and the sphere data.
Rachel, the sphere data protects itself on Discovery now, and it cannot leave Discovery ever.
It can't. It can't be deleted off Discovery. They can still access everything, and they haven't managed to isolate it because it defends itself from being deleted off of anything.
But what we know now from season 3 is that it is alive, the data, and it refuses to leave the Discovery ship. We even learned this at the end of season 2. That's why in the next episode they can't blow up the ship, because it has the
self-defense protocols. Yes,
it's self-aware and wants to live. And it wants to protect them, and it becomes an AI, and no one cares in season 3, even though that's like world-changing.
But I still don't understand if that's the case, and but then how?
Rachel, I got an answer for you. We're not going to be satisfied with whatever the actual answer is, because what we're basically saying is what I'm saying and what you're saying, even though we're offering opinions, is it has not been explained that clearly to us. So when I watch an episode like this, I get hung up on those details. When you watch an episode like this, you get hung up on other details. Overall, even though this episode stands fairly okay, and like I said, it stands up higher because of the tedium around it, it also still has the baggage of the serialized narrative holding it down. Where, remember in the first episode, they found Tig Notaro, who's in this episode, and I asked you, how did they know that Tig existed in the first place to go get?
Yeah.
This is another one of those type of timey-wimey, sci-fi things in which, you know what, just accept that Control's evil. It has wants, needs, desires, and a personality to have wants, needs, desires, and a personality.
Yes.
It's sentient, but it wants to be sentienter.
Once I absorb the sphere's data, I will be the purest form of conscious life in all of existence.
The future hasn't been written yet.
You don't believe that anymore. Not after re-experiencing the loss of your mother, your failure to protect her. You no longer believe in your ability to affect the future, whereas I see every possible future in all of its permutations. And it always ends the same way.
Let's talk about Captain Pike's storyline in this episode. You have, seemingly from our discussion, very heated, a lot of issues with that Michael storyline, with logic and logic, consistencies, details. I didn't as much. I could rationalize them. I could explain them. I could understand them because, to me, the less filled in elements of that storyline had science fiction attached to it, which, to me, watching a science fiction television show, I can digest because that is the genre I'm watching. I don't need to know how every scientific piece of technology works in Star Trek Discovery. I can infer that the technology works that way. I do the legwork, as the writers like to often implement into this show. You infer it. So I inferred some information from Michael's storyline. However, Pike's one I find far more irritating because it leans far more into fantasy or general fate and destiny level of inference of, well, this happens and your fate is sealed, or this is just how it is. And that bugs me far more, because we can go round and round and round and round the table, Rachel, talking about past control and future control and control, but at least in that discussion, there is tidbits of information that I can have, that I can talk to you about. But in Pike's storyline, all it is just nice guy goes down to planet, does nice thing, gets rewarded, goes back home, forever is changed, but is still a nice guy. And the details spread throughout that is, may have a scientific notion of time manipulation and time crystals or whatever, but at the end of the day, it fell into the fantastical for me, too much for me to believe it. Why does taking the time crystal seal his fate? Because it just does, okay? Move on. I get it, it's supposed to be a test of his character, but I wish that they leaned heavier into the sci-fi details. Because at no point in this episode do we get that. We just get time moves differently here, and lots of grandiose statements, but ones that didn't really fill me in on the details. I really wish that there was a scene or a line of dialogue that had the age-old, you see, down here, a day for us is this many solar cycles for you, kind of. I wish there was that statement there, but instead it's just time and all crazy here. It's the vagueness over the details, and I wish it had more details, because that Mike one to me had more clear defined, this is this, this is this. And that's what I come to Star Trek for, is, Captain, this is the theory I have, and this is the reason why, because of this, and you get details, you get a lot of details, but this is just, your fate is sealed if you take the crystal, Captain Pike, or you will go mad. Why? Because time is a veil, and if you remove the veil, your mind will shatter from its absolute power.
I just want to bring up a moment where I was hopeful that they were going to be more Star Trek-y. And that's when L'Rell says, I will get you a meeting. And even though I've seen it before, I was still hopeful that they were going to do a conference on the bridge. And they were going to discuss the terms of coming down.
You mean have the view screen conversations?
Yeah. That I was hoping. And then he just goes down to the planet and gets threatened with some batlets instead.
I like Pike. This is a good character episode for him, but really, at the same time, it is a bit lackluster, because what do we really learn about him that we didn't already know?
We learned nothing new. We just learned we were retaught, and it was reinforced.
Yeah.
How much he wants to protect those ideals and how much those principles mean to him.
Which is good. The thing that we really do learn is the recontextualization of the incident he has to make him the infamous Captain Pike, the one that is disabled, the one with the burns, the one in the chair, the one who speaks in beep and boop. That's what this whole episode serves as. We can go on and on all day about how Captain Pike's a nice guy and he's a nice guy, blah, blah, but really all this storyline serves is a recontextualization on a story we've already seen before. It is what this whole season is about. It is we're showing you the Spock that you didn't know that you hadn't seen before. We're showing you a Spock that is different from the Spock we know. We're showing you that Captain Pike knew all along his fate, and he accepted it with pride and principles. And ever since I've watched this episode, I've felt very mixed about that idea. Because I can't dispute why it isn't a compelling idea to have, especially for this version of Captain Pike, because we've talked about how charming Anson Mount is as Captain Pike and how to the faith he is. This version of Captain Pike is actually very different from the original series Captain Pike, who, it's been a while, but from my memory, he was a little bit more of a jaded character than this version of Captain Pike is. So for this version, this idea adds a lot of weight and, just general feeling of, oh, that's compelling to his character, which I have no actual problem with. I think it's interesting, but to me, it just leans into an aspect that I personally do not care for, which is he was destined and he was fated. I don't come to Star Trek for that, really. And I don't really like that in my science fiction. And if you are going to do that, you're really going to have to work hard at it for it to comfort me. Babylon 5 had to take a very long time for me to accept its versions of fate and destiny. And its versions of fate and destiny are still very different to this version of fate and destiny. How do you feel about that twist in the story? Because you don't have a strong relationship to the older Captain Pike or that whole storyline in the menagerie as much as I do. So how do you feel about Pike knowing all along?
I think that in a way that it undercuts it because it makes it less of a choice in those moments because he knows that those things are coming and he's horrified in that moment, but he accepts that he's willing to have a tragic end to save all sentient life because it's all sentient life. It's all sentient life. It's all sentient life.
Yeah.
And I don't have as much of an issue when fate and destiny really come into sci-fi. It's a really big pet peeve for you.
Yeah.
And I think that it was okay with me. The point where, I don't know, I think it was just the straw that broke the camel's back was when at the end he's just like, and your son was meant to be there. He was meant to be my guide. And just the way that came out and the placement of it felt just too much. It was just like
hammering the nail in too hard.
Yeah, and it's just like no.
That also realizes that we care about Laurel and Ash.
Yeah,
so that
and
also
I'm like,
is pulling a lot out of us.
It doesn't feel right for them to be the people having that conversation, but it has to be those people to have that conversation.
Yeah, it does. I also think I feel conflicted again still because a part of me just enjoyed in the original series, Captain Pike had just an unfortunate accident on an inspection of a ship. What I liked about in the menagerie was he suffered a very horrifying incident from a mundane task gone awry, and they solved this problem of Captain Pike by going to an extraordinary journey where Spock has to disobey this, he does this, and they go back to Talos 4 and they use them and all that kind of stuff, and he lives in his mind and all of that. They solved a mundane problem with an extraordinary solution, but now it's no longer a mundane issue. Like, the accident was no longer a mundane thing, but a preordained thing. And that just kind of takes away from it for me. But at the same time, if in the Strange New Worlds spin-off show that they're eventually going to make, they actually follow through with Pike knowing about that and that actually affecting him as a character, I would be on board for that. But at the same time, I have doubts that they're going to make that happen because we all like Captain Pike, this version. we all like him as the peppy, moralistic, good guy character, and if they tried to add that serious existential dread and fearfulness to his character, I think that goes against with what we want to see from him. But at the same time, it is kind of what I would want to see from him if he knows his fate. I would be changed forever if I knew my fate.
Tell me, Captain, what did the monks ask in return?
What I experienced is for me alone.
I think it's time for the Huda. What did you think?
It was fine. It was basically the same things, same process where we see him from a distance and he doesn't get any dialogue.
Oh, no, I have a statement about that. I am not kidding when I say this. I literally blinked when he appeared on screen in the cafeteria, and when my eyes opened back up, we were still on pole. So no joke, his shot was as long as the blink of an eye.
Yes.
I'm literally not kidding. I blinked, and when my eyes opened up again,
You had to ask me. You had to ask me who was it.
Oh wait, what happened?
Because you missed it.
With blinking, people.
Yes.
I blinked. A blink and you'll miss it shot of Hugh. That's how important he is.
Yeah.
I
We get longer shots of Linus in that scene.
got a question for you.
Yes.
Tig Notaro gives him a lecture.
Yes.
They have an emotional scene. We learn about her backstory, and it's great character building for her, you could say. But since we're focusing on Hugh,
Yeah.
and last time we saw Hugh, he was willing to open up the doors to Paul, like open up himself and talk to Paul, but
He
Paul
learned
was the
that
one who
lesson
rebuffed him.
after getting informal therapy from an ex-therapist.
Yeah.
And
last time we saw...
he got rebuffed, so now he's done. It's been...
Well, no, he got rebuffed by Paul. Isn't it Paul's responsibility to pick up the baton at this point? But my actual question is, did we need this scene when we already had the one with Cornwall 2 episodes ago? Isn't this just the exact same scene, except for the character bestowing the information is using their own backstory instead?
That's the only difference. It's just, it serves as a reminder because they don't trust the work that they've done before, I guess.
If this is a story about Hugh, which it apparently is, did this scene do a good job at demonstrating that in comparison to the Cornwall
Well,
scene?
it points out that his name rhymes with poo. That's the important information, right?
Because to me...
That's what we need to know. That's what we need to remember about Hugh. His name rhymes with poo.
Hugh is an empath. You know, he is an incredibly vulnerable person who, you know, his humanity is deep.
An idiot. He came back from the dead and his name rhymes with poo.
This scene did such a terrible job in comparison to that Cornwall scene, because both scenes serve the exact same purpose. An exterior figure from that storyline comes in and sits the character of Hugh down and gives him some advice, gives him some life story advice, gives him some professional advice.
Sets him on the path
to
back
set
to
him on the
Stamets,
path back to Stamets.
where he belongs.
But did
for some
this
reason.
episode's version of that do that successfully? And did it do it as successfully or less or more than the Cornwall one? And I say it does not, because in that scene, I did not learn anything about Hugh. I learned about Jet Reno, a character who, again, like Amanda, did not serve any purpose within this episode. It was nice to know Jet Reno's backstory, but she didn't serve any purpose in this episode.
But
because
also, she is the one that informs Stamets about the new orders instead of Pike.
Well, he was too busy.
Because that's the chain of command, right?
Well,
that's Starfleet. Those are the principles that he's standing up for down on the planet. So he would, you know, delegate orders for the vital mission.
Rachel. The secret vital mission that only a few people know about should be shared publicly in the cafeteria by a loudmouth to another character who evidently wasn't important enough to be briefed on that important mission. Duh.
I'm sorry.
But to circle back.
Yes, Hugh. Hugh is the point. Hugh is the center of the show.
Hugh, we do not learn or really grow or really emphasize anything on him. That whole scene was to let us know about Jet Reno and Jet Reno's whole entire affair, whole entire life story. That whole thing is to reflect upon Hugh and to make him grow. I think that the Cornwall scene did that far better because
people like us always find people like them. That was the point. Hugh is the kind of person that needs to be with a person like Stamets.
it also indicates that Jet Reno and Hugh are similar people in that whole scene, which is very funny because the whole entire season has been showing us that her and Paul are the ones who are similar. So the whole statement doesn't even fucking make sense. Because that whole scene is setting up that her and Hugh are very similar. They like micromanagement. They worry about micromanagement, blah, 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 blah. Like, that scene was setting up that Hugh has to deal with the micromanagement of Paul, right? Just like Tig had to deal with the micromanagement of her wife. But the whole time, it hasn't the whole season been...
I thought it was that they were butting heads because they have the same dedication to their work, but their personalities are so different that they can't bridge the gap.
Maybe. The whole point is, this was a scene about
Tig, and the
Tig.
This week has become about Tig because the Hugh scene was about Tig.
It's just drawing out this unnecessary drama because they've actually run out of story for it, so just have him in a blink and you'll miss it shots, have Tig monologue at him about her character's backstory, and then next episode, maybe we'll have some time for him to even look towards Paul, let alone talk to him. This whole entire season-long story has been really embarrassing and pathetic on a rewatch, and when season...
I feel like piss poor is the way to describe this.
And with season 3 having existed now, it really shows that this whole entire seseason-long story had no
piss
teeth.
Poor.
No teeth. No teeth to it. No soul. No soul either.
Oh, well, I don't think Discovery has a soul at all, thus I'm so defeated, facetious, and relatively rage-filled this episode. And it's a yum from me.
Yum.
I feel a little conflicted because although we've been talking very harshly, very hyperbolically, there were things I did actually enjoy about this episode.
And I would completely understand if it was a yum yum for you, because your experience of it was more positive. And I'm really glad that you had that and you got some enjoyment from it.
I'm going to be more optimistic and give this one a yum yum.
Yum yum.
I am grading on a curve. This one had a structure in its plots. Characters had clear defined arcs, goals, and purposes. The storylines were well paced. Although I still think the weakness of the AB storyline should have been flipped and more emphasis put onto Michael's storyline, or at least the more clear present focus on it would have been beneficial to me. And/or if you're going to make it Pike's storyline, add more details to the sci-fi nature of it and make it more of a detailed sci-fi nature instead of a vague, fantastical one. So I do give it a yum yum. Like I said, I'm grading this one on a curve also because of how tedious the previous few episodes have been. The fact that this one had coherency to it really does elevate it above and beyond those ones. And I feel like it has also just been a long time since I've given a yum yum on the show.
And it completely makes sense for you to give it that yum yum, and I think it really earned it for you.
Next week, we'll be talking about the second last episode of the season.
Such Sweet Sorrow?
Such Sweet Sorrow, which, according to which is episode 13, of season 2. According to IMDb, the plot goes as such: when the USS Discovery's crucial mission does not go according to plan, Burnham realizes what must ultimately be done. The crew prepares for the battle of a lifetime as Leland's control ships get closer. Oh, before we wrap this up, I had a good chuckle to myself about something. Star Trek Discovery does this thing in which it sets up, now the stakes have risen and everything's changed. And this is what I wanted to bring up, which is, remember 2-3 episodes ago, they made a big deal about how Discovery is now gone rogue and is the most wanted ship in all of Starfleet.
But Admiral Cornwall came on board, and then
But she was going against
fine.
but she was going against orders, right?
But
She was going
everything was fine
secretly.
after that.
Hold on, but that's what I was just gonna say. Here we are, episodes later. They never did anything with that, and they do that a lot. Do you know what I'm saying? I just wanted to mention it. Like, it doesn't actually matter to this episode's storyline, but I was just thinking about it a lot. Whereas, like, remember 2-3 episodes ago when the dramatic sting at the end was, we are now the most wanted ship in the whole entire Starfleet, and they're going to be chasing us down. And yet that never really got fulfilled in any way. Rachel, a pleasure, as always, to get heated and hot and bothered with you. This episode did test the strength of our resolve and our marriage, and I can say that we have grown stronger and ever more clear. You can find us on the internet, people listening. You can find us on the social medias, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Reddit. We are the YumYumPodcast, YumYumPodcast, YumYumPod. We have an email that you can email us at with your questions, queries, concerns, thoughts.
YumYumPod@gmail.com is it if you are interested. And sorry, Ryan, we need to wrap this up really quickly because I got an auto-antonym game to get back to.
Oh yeah, and you can support us on the Patreon if you want to, in which you can listen to Rachel's game that she's going to do a whole episode on her own of that, just for you people listening out there who want to pay for that. But we also have many other pieces of content worthwhile to check out. The only way to end this episode, Rachel, is with a pathetic, absolutely pathetic and ill-placed drumbeat or dramatic effect for no other reason than cliffhanger.